What if I told you there's a war happening right now? A war involving the United States, Israel, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the entire flow of global oil. And most people have no idea how deep it goes or why it literally cannot end. Today, I'm going to walk you through the full picture. The secret back-channel negotiations that quietly fell apart. The Saudi Crown Prince's shocking demand for American ground troops. Iran's new stranglehold on the world's most important waterway. And the Israeli master plan that even the New York Times has now confirmed. By the end of this video, you will understand why every headline you read saying peace talks are close is basically fiction. So let's get into it. In early 2025, something remarkable happened behind closed doors. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan gathered together in Islamabad for what was supposed to be the beginning of peace negotiations to end this US-Iran war. They even invited the Americans, and the Americans showed up enthusiastically. There was just one catastrophic problem. Nobody invited Iran. Now, you might think that's an obvious mistake, but here's the truth. America and its allies didn't forget. They tried. Iranian officials were approached, and Iran largely said no. There was talk of a backdoor channel, but so far it hasn't produced results. Now let's talk about the single most important geographic location in this entire conflict, the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply flows here. Iran has now effectively closed it. No ship gets through unless Iran allows it. Some vessels, particularly Chinese-flagged ships, have been given a pass. Iran's Revolutionary Guard came back with a counter-proposal. Iran should collect fees from every ship that passes, just like Egypt collects fees from ships using the Suez Canal. Saudi Arabia's dangerous flip. Now here's where the story takes a turn that very few analysts have fully explained. The Gulf states, Qatar, the UAE, Oman, are unified in one message: end this war, negotiate, make a deal, get the oil moving again. This makes complete logical sense. But Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia has changed its position. According to reporting from the New York Times, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, has been personally lobbying President Trump to continue and even escalate the war against Iran. He's told Trump that the current US-Israeli military campaign represents what he calls a, quote, historic opportunity to remake the Middle East. That sounds like an Israeli talking point, and it essentially is. Here's why MBS flipped. Saudi Arabia started this war aligned with Israel, betting that American and Israeli military power would neutralize Iran quickly, cheaply, and permanently. Instead, the war has dragged on. Iran has bombed Saudi oil fields and gas infrastructure. The Strait of Hormuz is locked. Iranian military capacity, while damaged, is far from destroyed. MBS now realizes that if America withdraws, Saudi Arabia is left alone, face to face with a battered but dangerous Iran. So the calculus changed. Better to go all the way in than to stop halfway and be left exposed. And so MBS reportedly pushed further. According to the New York Times, he has advocated for ground operations against Iran in his private conversations with Trump. Ground operations, meaning American soldiers on the ground, fighting Iran for Saudi Arabia. Now ask yourself a simple question. If Saudi Arabia wants ground troops in Iran, why aren't they sending Saudi ground troops into Iran? If Israel is pushing for a ground invasion, why isn't the IDF leading that invasion? These are armies that constantly brag about their military capabilities. But when it comes to the actual fighting, they want someone else's soldiers to do it. What Trump actually believes. So where does Donald Trump stand in all of this? Reports paint a picture of a president who is genuinely confused about the situation and being fed information that isn't accurate. On one hand, Trump has repeatedly said he wants to end the war quickly. He's told reporters that he finds some Iranian leaders very reasonable and that there's potential for a new era of US-Iran relations. On the other hand, Trump has also allowed strikes on Iran's South Pars gas field, despite Arab allies warning it would trigger Iranian retaliation. And the reason this happened? Because Israel informed the US in advance and the US green-lit it. The Gulf states thought they had successfully lobbied against such strikes. They believed their investments in the Trump relationship had bought them influence. They were wrong. Former Congressman Joe Kent stated that Israel has been feeding the United States intelligence that is, in his words, not close to true. The idea that there are moderate Iranian leaders waiting in the wings. Kent says that's a fiction. The CIA and DIA are reportedly telling Trump the same thing. There is no such person. The Israelis made it up. But Trump still seems to believe it. And so we have a president waiting for a moderate Iranian leader who doesn't exist. What Iran is actually demanding. So what would it actually take to end this war? Let's look at both sides' demands, because this is where you see just how impossible the situation really is. Iran's conditions for any peace deal, according to the Wall Street Journal, are: first, a binding pledge from both the United States and Israel that they will not launch future attacks on Iran, ever. Second, financial compensation, reparations. Iran wants to be paid for the damage caused by the war. Now, is the first demand unreasonable? Not really. Any country that agreed to stop fighting would want a guarantee that the ceasefire holds. But here's the problem. A promise from Israel not to attack Iran is, to put it politely, not worth much. Israel has a documented history of launching strikes in the region whenever it determines there's a security threat. And it defines security threat very broadly. And reparations? The idea that the United States Congress would authorize financial payments to Iran, a country that American media has spent decades demonizing, is, in the current political environment, essentially impossible. But now let's look at what America is demanding in return. Because if you thought Iran's demands were ambitious, brace yourself. The United States is still insisting on complete dismantlement of Iran's nuclear enrichment program, a full suspension of Iran's ballistic missile program, and a total cessation of Iran's support for allied militias across the Middle East, including Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others. Read that list again. America is demanding that Iran dismantle its nuclear program, even though Iran's nuclear facilities have already taken significant damage in the war. America is demanding Iran give up all its ballistic missiles, the primary deterrent that Iran has spent decades building. And America is demanding Iran abandon its entire regional foreign policy and let Washington and Tel Aviv dictate who Tehran can and cannot support. This is not a negotiating position. This is a demand for total and unconditional surrender from a country that is currently holding the world's oil supply hostage, refusing to come to the negotiating table, and which has demonstrated that it can absorb massive military strikes and keep fighting. Why nobody can get out. Here's the brutal reality. Both sides have positioned themselves in a way where backing down looks like losing. For Iran, the Revolutionary Guard just discovered that by closing the Strait of Hormuz, they have more economic leverage over the global economy than almost any other single actor on the planet. Their military has been damaged, but apparently not enough for the US to force the strait open. And every week the strait stays closed, Iran's negotiating position gets stronger. Why would they surrender that leverage? For America, The Trump administration painted itself into a corner by aligning entirely with Israel's war objectives. Those objectives, denuclearize Iran, defang its missile forces, end its regional alliances, are not achievable through airstrikes alone. They would require a full-scale ground invasion that would cost trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives. And even then, it might not work. Meanwhile, every peace proposal so far has collapsed because Iran won't come to the table. The Gulf states can't influence Washington the way Israel can. Israel doesn't want peace. Israel wants to expand. That last point is critical. Israeli officials have reportedly been discussing the annexation of significant portions of Lebanon and Syria, territory that has come under Israeli military control during this broader conflict. The logic, apparently, is that since America is absorbing the financial and military cost of the war, Israel might as well use the opportunity to expand its borders permanently. So when you hear about peace negotiations, talks are progressing, a deal is close, both sides are signaling flexibility. Understand what's actually happening. The Trump administration is leaking stories to friendly outlets to manage domestic perception and justify market moves, while the actual positions of both sides remain miles apart. The leaked peace story, what it really means. When White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about the leaked Wall Street Journal story on back-channel peace negotiations, she said, "There are sensitive diplomatic discussions, and the US will not negotiate through the press. This is a fluid situation, and speculation should not be taken as final." That is a non-denial. That is an administration that is happy to let the story run because the story is useful to them. What story is useful? The story that says, we really wanted peace, but Iran won't cooperate. The story that says, our allies are united behind us. The story that says, Trump is a deal maker trying to bring this home. None of it reflects the actual state of the negotiations, because the negotiations, such as they are, have barely begun. Closing. So where does that leave us? We have a war with no realistic off-ramp. Two sides whose demands are completely incompatible. A key waterway that's effectively under Iranian control. Gulf states that are either broke, scared, or pushing for escalation. An American president who's been fed bad intelligence. And an Israeli government that sees every day of this war as an opportunity to reshape the Middle East in its favor. If you were hoping for good news, I don't have it. But what I can give you is the truth. And the truth is, anyone telling you this war is almost over is either lying to you or hasn't done the homework. If you want to stay ahead of what's actually happening in the Middle East, hit subscribe. Because we're going to keep pulling this apart, piece by piece, until the full picture is clear. Share this video with anyone who's been told this war is under control. They deserve to know what's actually going on.